Welcome back to Rerouted. After a short break, we are back with a new episode with guest Tadeh Issakhanian. Tadeh originally planned on becoming a doctor, but ended up beginning a career in environmental work. He spent time as an air quality specialist, a congressional staffer, a consultant at Deloitte, and a presidentially appointed senior climate advisor to the administrator of the GSA under the Biden administration. We talk about his early career, moving to DC, how he's consistently leveraged his network, and more. I hope you enjoy. So, Tyler, thank you so much for joining me today. It's awesome to have you. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. I'm excited. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So let's start off. Could you just give us a little bit of a background for college? What did you study? Where'd you go? All that type of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in Fresno, California. So I went to Fresno State. And going into college, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And then, I realized, hey, as a young Armenian, I got a couple choices. I can be a lawyer or a doctor. So I might as well go be a doctor. So I was a bio and a chemistry major. And it was really interesting in undergrad. I did some internships at a local children's hospital, and I was all in on, going to med school and taking, the pre-med school tests, things like that. Um, and it was great. I mean, it was a very interesting major. I think it teaches you how to look at technical and scientific text and understand kind of complex problems. There's a lot of also like calculus and physics and all these things that I had never been exposed to. Um, so that was my undergrad. And as my undergrad was coming to an end, I kind of realized, hey, you know what? Med school's not the thing for me. I started getting involved in running. Funny enough, like I started running the cycling club at Fresno State. And
Hmm,
with that came hey, we need to get sponsors to pay for our travel and these types of things. We need to organize events and races and bring colleges from all over the country or all over California to Fresno. And just through that, I found a lot of success and a lot of joy. I found a lot more joy doing that than figuring out physics problems.
sure.
Um, so I kind of decided, hey, you know what? I maybe need to do something else. And that's why after my undergrad, I went into an MBA also at Fresno State. And the idea there was like, let me open the aperture on what I've been exposed to. And if I decide to go to med school, well, great. I have a, advanced degree now. I can apply and go to med school still. But I think that just opened up a whole new area of opportunity. And I went down a completely different path. Um,
Hmm.
which is funny. You spend 4 years focused on something and then you go do something completely different. But again, the things that I learned and the skill sets I acquired by being in a hard science major, I think even now in business have been very fruitful.
All right. So you've got your MBA. What are you doing now after you're graduating with your MBA? Or what did you do? Not what you're doing right this second, but right after you graduated.
Yeah, well, during my MBA, so I did a weekends program. So I was
Okay.
working at a local air pollution control district after I graduated college or university. So I'm working my first job and doing the MBA at the same time. Um,
Hmm.
and then, that is a 3 year process, between graduating, finishing MBA. And in that time, I kind of realized, the work I was doing at the Air District was very interesting.
Hmm.
Um, but the ceiling was very low, right? This is a
Sure.
place where people stay their entire careers, which is awesome
Hmm.
because there's just so much institutional knowledge. But again, there wasn't a lot of mobility. Um, and I kind of got involved in some other things. I got involved in some politics. I got involved in the policy side of what I was doing at the Air District. So, when I graduated with my MBA, I actually decided, I'm going to move to DC. So I'm a fresh MBA graduate, just moved to DC, and I am a free intern on Capitol Hill working for Congressman Jim Costa, trying to figure out this next kind of path, right? So moved off the med school path more of a business path. Great. Now I'm in the environmental kind of business area. And now I'm making
Hmm.
another shift into politics and I'm on the Hill.
All right. I want to take a step back real quick.
Yep.
How did you air pollution feels very different to me from my view from biology, what you're studying your undergrad. How did you get to that first position?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a theme across my career where
Okay.
my network has dictated the opportunities that have come about.
Hmm.
So again, nothing planned, but I was cycling through cycling and classmates in college. I met a close friend who was working at the air district at the time, and his
Mm.
father-in-law or to-be father-in-law was the head of the air district. So through him, I met and through cycling a bunch of folks that worked at the air district.
Mm.
And initially they said, "Hey, do you want to come be a student assistant?" And this is while I was still an undergrad. And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." I was a supervisor at a pizza place,
Hmm.
and student assistant at Air District was double the pay, but also like the Air District, right, does environmental modeling, it does compliance, it does all these things. So like my background in the sciences
Hmm.
translated. So I came in as a student assistant, worked my butt off. Then when I graduated undergrad, I got an offer. Hey, do you want to come on full time? Came on full time initially in the grants and incentives program. A year later, transitioned into the permitting and environmental compliance side of things. So I was doing environmental modeling, um, which was, again, something I had never done, but I learned on the job. So
Mm.
that's kind of how I transitioned initially from med school. No, we're not going to do that to student assistant at the area district to a full-time job. And then, you know, started my MBA and now we're moving to DC and trying politics.
All right. So now you're in DC, you're trying politics. What's that like working as a congressional staffer? What type of work were you doing? Was it still in the vein of environmental or was it completely different? What did it look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very humbling experience. And I think something that, you know, now that I've been in this position, I talk to a lot of young professionals that go on the Hill. I try to help them understand this. As an intern, you're there to do the grunt work, right? You're there
Yeah.
to sort mail, do a little bit of research, and just help out in the office any way you could. Um, I was lucky. I knew the office a little bit through the work I was doing in the Air District and just in my involvement in the community. So I got a
Hmm.
little bit more responsibility as an intern. Got to go to some hearings and just focus on the environmental side because people knew I had a background there.
Hmm.
But really, I mean, the 2.5, 3 months that I was an intern, I mean, the focus was like, it doesn't matter what task I'm given. I'm just going to knock this out of the park and, make this the most important thing that I'm doing today. Um, and, I had to go into it with no ego. Like, I can't
Yeah.
go in and be like, hey, oh, I already have work experience and I have an MBA. I shouldn't be
Hmm.
doing this, free intern stuff
Yeah.
because I understood like, hey, this is a foot in the door. This is how the Hill works. Everyone starts off as an intern. I have this opportunity. There's others that wanted this that didn't get it. So I'm just gonna do my best and see where this takes me. And that was the intern experience. I mean, I gave people tours of the Capitol and
Yeah.
did you know anything and everything that they asked for. And
Hmm.
that's kind of how I got my start in DC.
All right. I know that DC is an incredibly expensive city to live in, and being an unpaid intern, it sounds difficult financially. How did you manage that?
Yeah, I mean, I had a little bit of savings
Sure.
from having worked for a number of years in undergrad and once I graduated. So that was my base, and I had to
Okay.
kind of plan around that. Um, which eventually like that became an issue. So 3 months in, I was hired as a scheduler slash press assistant,
Okay.
which again, great. I got an opportunity for a full-time job.
Hmm.
I'm not doing legislative work. I'm not using my MBA, but I'm scheduling and setting up things for the congressman. But it's a stepping stone. Um,
Yeah.
and it was a great role. I learned a ton. It's one of those things where the more different experiences you have, you take little things from them. So even being a scheduler on the Hill, I learned a bunch of stuff that I now use in the role I have now, in the role I had in the Biden administration, et cetera. But eventually, like we got to the end of my first year in DC, and the little bit of savings I had kind of dwindled away.
Mm.
Now on the Hill, I think it's 50K is the pay minimum. But
Oh.
before it was, whatever they want to pay you, they pay you. So I think I made $29,000 as an annual salary.
Oh.
So
Hmm.
again, in DC, like, you know, I'm completely on my own financially. Um, it got to a point where, hey, I need to look elsewhere.
Hmm.
No one's leaving the office. I'm not gonna, I also didn't want to go work for another member. Like this was my hometown member. If I was gonna be on the Hill, I wanted to work for this individual. So I started looking around, and that's kind of, how I ended up transitioning into my first consulting role at Booz Allen.
All right. Can you tell us a little bit about that first consulting role at Booz Allen?
Yeah, and I'll share the story about how I even kind of got it. Again,
Perfect.
everything's about in my career has been about networking, and there's very intentional networking when you go to an event or you reach out to somebody on LinkedIn, and then there's like the
Mm.
secondary passive networking, and this is very passive. Like I met somebody at a housemate's birthday party,
Mm.
and we had a conversation. He was, you know, in the environmental space. He was at Booz Allen. We chatted a little bit, and I kept touch with him over the next 7, 8 months. And in the November timeframe, I saw, hey, Booz Allen's hiring for an environmental consultant. Well, who do I know at Booz Allen? Oh, this individual. I reach out, and it just happens to be that it's his job that they're hiring for. He took an offer
Oh.
elsewhere. So
Hmm.
he's like, yep, this is my role. I know what you do. I know your background. You'd be a good fit. Let me, put in a reference. Now, not everything works out that easily. He came back to me a couple hours later and said, hey, they already have a candidate.
Mm.
So, they'll keep an eye out for you. A week goes by, and I guess the candidate, for whatever reason, didn't work out. Like they gave them an offer, something happened, and they said, "Hey, you want to come in for an interview?" I said, "Sure." Came in, interviewed with a few people, got hired, um, and now my whole plan of moving to DC and working on Capitol Hill has completely changed. Now I'm joining Booz Allen Hamilton as a consultant, um, and that was a interesting experience. Your first day is onboarding. The second day, you go pick up your computer, you meet your team, etc. The night of my second day on the job, I get a call from my coach and my manager, if you will. And she asked me two things. She goes, do you own a suit? And I said, yeah, I own a suit. She's like, great. Can you wear a suit and meet one of the principals at the EPA office in the morning at 8 a.m.? Like, yeah, of course, anything you need.
Hmm.
Um, so I walk in, I meet this guy who's my boss's boss for, I don't know, 60 seconds. And then we walk into a meeting with the chief operating officer of the EPA, and the chief of staff of the EPA. And this is right at the beginning of the Trump administration. So this is under Scott Pruitt's EPA.
Okay.
And they go, hey, you know, this is the team from Booz Allen. And they essentially tell us, hey, we need you to do research and gather everything and anything that's been said about the EPA, different EPA programs, issues with the EPA, timeline, like inefficiencies, et cetera, from the past 10 years. Um, and this is like we're middle of December, like right before the holidays. Um,
Hmm.
and we want to use this information to justify what they wanted to do was revamp every single EPA program. And their whole idea was the EPA is inefficient and ineffective. So give us congressional testimony, let us know what industry has said, like give us all the dirt on the EPA,
Mm.
which you know, strange first assignment. Also just a strange first assignment as like I'm an environmental person. I worked on, for a Democratic congressman, and now a Republican administration's asked me to do this research. But
Yeah.
hey, that's the job. And we walk out, and my principal goes, "Well, hey, I'm heading out for Christmas break. Let's tag up after the new year. I'm sure you're going to do an amazing job." Um, and that was the extent of like the guidance, right? It was like, "Hey,
Oh, yeah.
they asked you go do this, go do this." So I spent Christmas break in DC.
Mm.
First Christmas since moving to DC. I didn't go back home. Just, I mean, going through hours and hours of testimony and written things.
Oof.
And this is like, yeah, I thought about it the other day. I'm like, this is before Chat GPT. It would have been so much easier to go, hey, look at the transcript of this hearing and pull out everything that was said about the EPA. But like, it was
Yeah.
all, you know, hand done essentially. So that was interesting. I did some more EPA work, and then I met somebody that was working on electric vehicles for the Navy within Booz
Mm.
Allen. And electric vehicle work is something that I had done at the Air District. I'd started the first charging station incentive program in California, worked on some vehicle programs, et cetera. So it was like something that I had a passion for. And again, the weird timing thing, like I met with him on Friday. On Monday, he let Booz Allen know that he got an offer from the Navy. So he's going to become a Fed.
Hmm.
And he was like, well, I talked to this person, you know, on Friday. I think he'd be a great replacement. So
Mm.
they pull me in, they interview me. They're like, hey, would you want to do this? I'm like, absolutely. And a week later, I'm sitting at the Washington Navy Yard as the EV expert, ready to help the Navy with their fleet electrification.
Yeah.
And that lasts 3 months. And then this is just kind of the how consulting works. Booz
It,
Allen had a 3-year contract. I think they had won it once or twice. It had come up for recompete. So when I joined, they had already submitted their recompete, and they ended
mm,
up losing the contract to Deloitte. So three
mm.
months in, they're like, "Hey, we lost the contract. This work ends in a month." Um, and I'm like, "Okay." So I'm new to this. What does that even mean? Luckily, the work, and this is getting technical, but the work, there's a base contract, and then there's optional things that are related to the base contract that you can add on. And the
Mm.
EV work was an
Okay.
add-on.
Okay.
And it being an add-on meant Deloitte didn't win that piece of the work. And in this case, the client was still interested and still had funding and wanted to keep me along. So I went to Booz Allen and said, hey, they still want to keep this. They told me, like, great, let's work, let's find another contract vehicle to put this on. That slowed down a bit. And I kind of saw, the light at the end of the tunnel. I was like, they're not going to be able to find a contract. Like there's too much else going on for them to prioritize this.
Hmm.
So again, network. I reached out to a person that I had met through one of, the mentors in the CGP program that brought me to DC.
Okay.
Um, Said, hey, I know you're at Deloitte. I know you guys won this project. I have this additional piece of work. It's fully funded. It's, X amount of dollars a year. The client wants to keep me. Can you figure out who the partner is that won this work? I want to see if like you guys would be interested in it and can bring me over. Um,
Sure.
and funny enough, like he called me back. The partner called me like 20 minutes later. Hey, I heard you have work. Explained it to him. He goes, okay, well, I need to do some due diligence. He went, talked with the client, I'm sure, verified that like, yep, they want me, there's funding for this work, etc. They pulled me in to an interview later that week and got an offer the following week. And like, so now I've spent about, a year on the Hill, 9 months at Booz
Hmm.
Allen, and now I'm jumping to Deloitte, making another kind of shift, if you will, in my career.
Hmm.
And I've only been in DC, and I've been in DC for less than 2 years.
All right. Is that I'm wondering, is the ability that you've had to meet a lot of people and be able to move around and have that flexibility, do you think that has anything to do with the fact that you were living in DC? Or is that like, is it anything to do with the location? Or is it just something where it's like you're a shining star that loves to talk to people, and so that's kind of where it is. You know what I mean?
No, I think being in DC helped.
Okay.
Like I wouldn't have met those individuals if I had not been in DC. Um,
Hmm.
and I think that's the thing with networking is like I could go and look up who are the environmental or transportation people at Booz Allen and Deloitte if I lived in California,
Hmm.
and still probably would never have connected with the specific individuals that opened the door on these opportunities.
Sure.
Um, the other thing too is like I think I knew what networking was when I lived in California. And
Hmm.
I had reached out to some people and had some conversations, but like I really learned what networking was when I came to DC. That was a
Sure.
skill that I developed here. So no, I mean, those opportunities would not have come up if I was still back in California or elsewhere.
Okay. Got it. So where we're at in the timeline. So now you're at Deloitte, fresh there. And you're there for quite a bit, but I want to talk about, do you think that there are some certain like pros of consulting work and what you're like learning, and kind of transferable skills to other worlds? I've heard of people, leaving consulting to do some other stuff in the tech world. What are your thoughts on that as someone who's been in the consulting world for quite a while and really focused on energy?
Yeah, I think consulting is a great field to get into because I think it turns you into a Swiss Army knife.
Sure.
Um, because as a consultant, you have to do so many things at one time. Um,
Mm.
so great, you're a subject matter expert in something, but at the same time, you need to, and this is kind of a joke, like all we do is make PowerPoints and presentations.
Yeah.
Well, sure, that's part of it, but I think what you learn from doing that is how to sell an idea, how to
Sure.
present data, how to present work. So you become much better at being client facing.
Mm.
Um, at the same time, like when you're on a project and you're leading a project, you manage. So, like, I manage the financials of the project, I manage the staffing of the project, I manage the staffing turnover. I work with our contracts team to put together contracts. You end up not working within just your Deloitte bubble, but you're working with industry. So, I've been able to sign alliances with other tech partners and figure out that process of how does an outside company and Deloitte come together, get some terms and conditions drafted, and then go to market together to sell a combination of what that company does best and what we do best. Um, so you learn that. I mean, that's the thing with consulting is you learn so many different aspects of the job, and I think that's why it's so, consultants get picked up and go into industry and become very successful because they've not just done one job, they've done a
Hmm.
multitude of jobs. So you get somebody that can come into a project and not just understand the subject matter and get the work done, but they can manage the financials, they can manage the team, they can manage a
Mm.
client relationship, they can do business development. So that's another piece of it, right? We need to sell work to be able to go do work. So
Yeah.
how do you identify those client needs? How do you approach clients? How do you respond to a solicitation?
Hmm.
Um, and then there's like this marketing piece of it as well, right? So I need to develop a brand for myself in this space. So we write white papers. I'm pitching to conferences to go speak on panels. Like all of
Mm.
those things make you a very well-rounded professional. And they're
Sure.
all transferable skills wherever else you go after consulting.
Yeah. How do you go about, or how have you gone about as well, kind of becoming that subject matter expert in what you're doing? It's you're talking about you're in the trenches, you're doing the work, you're taking Christmas breaks to learn everything about everything anyone's ever said about the EPA over the last 10 years. But when over the course of just becoming that guy who eventually becomes a presidential appointee, which we'll talk about in a second, how do you just go about becoming that guy?
Yeah, I think there's two things, or maybe three. One is, you're fully immersed in the client.
Mm-hmm.
So when I came in, you know, to the Navy project at Deloitte, like they're looking to procure vehicles. Well, I've never done procurement. They're looking to put
Mm-hmm.
in infrastructure. Well, I had some infrastructure background, but like I'm not an engineer. So
Mm-hmm.
some of it is you just learn by doing on the job. Um, the second part of it is, I was continuously vigilant in talking to people both inside the firm and people outside the firm all the time about what they do, what resources they have, what webinars they're joining. So like I really made it almost like a homework assignment to continue to learn about the space I was in.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the third and most important thing is, you know, Deloitte and, you know, all these firms, right? They're massive. There's over 100,000 people. There's people that are experts in all kinds of things. Um, I don't need to be the expert.
Sure.
I need to understand what the client needs and translate that into something that we can go deliver. So, we went and delivered a big kind of data transformation project for the same client, right? When
Mm-hmm.
the Trump administration came in, eventually they cut all the EOs for EVs. All of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden, there's no need for this work. Well, I'm
Mm-hmm.
still there, and if I don't pivot, then I'm going to lose this client in this project. I'm going to have to go find something else.
Sure.
So I knew just from listening, being in meetings, being with the client all the time, like data quality was a huge issue for them.
Okay.
Well, that's great, right? I can identify that. I can pitch, hey, I think we should come in and do a top-down analysis on why your data quality is this bad.
Mm-hmm.
We, and this is like, I'm just spitballing here with the client, but I'm like, there should be a dashboard that shows you every data field that you track and which one's correct and which one's incorrect. Like we should have some analytics, some tools. Like I know you want to make decisions based off the data. You can't. Let's get the data to where it's good enough where you can start to make decisions.
Yeah.
But that work I can't do. But I know
Sure.
that if I can sell the client on, yeah, I need that work, there are people in
Mm-hmm.
the firm that are experts in this space. They'll come in, I'll translate what the client actually needs, and they'll do the technical work. And that has been something that I've always done, right? We've built these data tools, we built a AI-driven procurement tool, we've done utilization analysis. The people that actually do this stuff are not me.
Mm.
And that's not my role. I don't need to be the expert in everything. I need to leverage the people that are around me to come in and solve these problems. And I play a
Mm.
specific role in that. But I think that's the other piece is like you could look at my resume and say, look, this person implemented this technology, built this tool, did this, did that. Well, yeah, I don't do the coding. I don't,
Mm-hmm.
build these things, but like I work with people to do that. And that's where it's not always subject matter expertise, but knowing how to use the resources that are around you, leverage the
Mm.
amazing people that you work with, and come together to solve a bigger problem that you could solve on your own.
Sure. Okay. I want to come back to a point you made, and I'm curious about you're talking about making sure that you understand your users, your clients' needs, and that way you're able to sell them more work. I'm curious how you've gone about developing that muscle because that's something where actually the last guest I had on, that's a lot of her work is related to developing empathy, not enthalpy. Geez, see, this is the science. I'm also oof. But anyways, user empathy and thinking about every B2B AI SaaS startup as well, developing user empathy. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, how have you gone about developing that muscle?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's as simple as just, you know, actually listening to what
Sure.
clients talk about over and over again.
Hmm.
Um, and, you know, kind of deducing what the core issue is. If they're constantly talking about, well, we can't make decisions, I can't make this decision. I don't have enough data. Or,
Hmm.
hey, we procure things just based off of, splitting the money evenly across installations across the US. And then you ask the question, I'm like, well, why do you do that? And they go,
Mm,
well, there's no other way that we could do it. Um, Little by little, you start to tease out that, like, hey, the issue is they don't trust their own data. They may not
mm,
explicitly say that, but they will speak to these issues over and over. And I think the thing too is, like, you have your main client, but your main client usually has a whole team that works with them. And then in the DoD context, there's echelons. So there's
okay.
people at the regional level, there's people at the installation level. And I always made it a point to say, like, great, the headquarters folks are my day-to-day clients, but the rest of these folks at the lower echelons are part of this organization. So let me go speak to them, right?
Mm,
Like, let me follow up on them. If they say something interesting in a call, like, let me write them an email and ask them, exactly what they meant. So I'm always kind of mining for more data and information on what people are feeling, because the people at the headquarters level may not feel the same heartburn as the people actually at the base doing the
mm,
day-to-day work. But
mhm,
connecting those two things is super important. And then the other thing is, at the end of the day, clients, everyone, everyone's a person. We're all people. We all have
mm,
self-motivation. So, understanding not only what your client needs to accomplish in their day-to-day tasks, but, like, what is their goals? Where do they want to go? What legacy do they want to leave? So,
mm,
the client that we worked on the data stuff with, like, he really wanted to leave his mark. This was his last role in the Navy before he retired. Um, and I could sense that he was a analytics based person. So
mhm,
I knew that he would be motivated by the thought of, hey, in the next 2 years while you're still here, if we can completely transform the data quality and the analytics capability of the Navy, that ends up being the legacy that you leave before you retire.
mm.
So not only understanding what the business need was, but what the personal motivators of the people that I work with are, I think becomes key in kind of identifying what people want to do. Because the data piece, and this is just an example that we keep going to, but the data piece could have been really important to the Navy. But if
Yeah.
the client and the leadership didn't care about it, I mean, I could try to sell them on all these amazing ideas and fixes. But if they weren't also personally motivated, they wouldn't pull the
Mhm.
trigger and, go after this work or hire us to help them achieve this. So it's a bit of like, what does the business need and what are the motivators of the people that are leading the business?
All right. So to kind of summarize, it's not just you're making sure that you're talking to different people in the organization, really understanding what people all across it or top to bottom need, and then just getting to know the person who you're actually trying to sell something to, and making sure that at the end of the day, you're doing what they want to do personally. You're helping them get that done.
Yeah, and
All right.
I think you need top-down buy-in, right? If we were
Okay.
going to go in and completely change how the organization looked at data, I couldn't go do something that the headquarters folks liked, but the individuals at the installations that actually dealt with the data every day hated. There would just
Yeah.
be a mutiny. So
Mm.
I'd understand and balance kind of what they need and what the headquarters folks need. So I think it's always about looking at the full picture, and understanding how to make something work for everyone. It's never going to work for everyone, but as close as you can be and as much as I can then say, hey, I know you want things this way, but we're doing it another way. And I can explain it and justify it. And it's something that is addressed instead of, like, just ignored.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
That's great. So, you worked at Deloitte, I'll say the first time around for how long?
About 6 years.
All right, about 6 years. So after that time, you became a presidential appointee for the GSA. Can you tell us a little bit about what you did in that organization?
Yeah, I mean, as a presidential appointee, your role is to come in and execute on the president's agenda.
Okay.
So as the senior climate advisor at GSA, my role was to execute on the climate priorities of the administration and
Mhm.
of GSA.
All right, and pause
Um,
real quick. Could you, what's GSA stand for?
yeah, it's the General Services Administration. GSA has been around for 75 years. They have a really interesting background. So GSA was the first federal agency to use email.
Hmm.
They're the first agency, actually one of the first entities in the US to build an online catalog of products that
Hmm.
somebody could procure. They do hundreds of billions of dollars in procurement for the government. And that is
Hmm.
everything from like, you know, cafeteria supplies and office supplies to they hold and execute tons of contracts for different agencies.
Hmm.
On the more technical side, GSA and the Department of Defense are the only two entities that can buy power, electricity for the federal government.
Hmm.
They also manage, over almost 500,000 non-tactical vehicle assets that they do the leasing procurement to all the federal agencies for. So the
Hmm.
GSA, though, isn't as known as, the Department of Defense or DOJ, et cetera, has a really outsized role in how the government functions. Um, so that's, and it was an agency that I worked with a lot through the work I did at Deloitte, so I knew them well.
Hmm.
Um, and I knew the impact that the agency could have. So when I got brought in, okay, we're executing on the president's goals. I'm in, the last year of the administration. So a lot of the work had already been started, but my role was a couple of things. One is GSA had about $2 billion dollars in bipartisan infrastructure and investment in Inflation Reduction Act money. And that funding was to be used for building technology that would make buildings more efficient, more cost effective. So a lot of that work was working with energy service companies to put together third-party financing projects um, to implement new technology. And that could be solar, that could be new boilers, that could be, battery storage. It could be a whole host of things. I mean, even just like, repairs and um, upgrades to the building and the systems themselves. Um,
Hmm.
and kind of how that works is, the government says, hey, we want to do this project. It's going to cost us $2 million, dollars, but we don't have $2 million dollars right now to do the project. But we know over the next 25 years that by doing this, it'll save us $1 million in utility costs.
Hmm.
Great. So they partner with a third party, a energy service company to say, hey, we'll pay the $1 million now. You pay the remaining amount. And over the next 25 years, as we save this additional $1 million by implementing this, we will pay
Hmm.
you back for what you covered for this project. And obviously, there's a percentage there that the energy service company gets on top of it, et cetera. But that helps the government implement projects that are going to save money in the short term, even if they don't have the
Hmm.
full funding to, pay for that project.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
part of it was that. Part of it was, I've done EV work for the federal government. That was still a executive order mandate. So I jumped into what the GSA was doing on electric vehicles. We worked on, again, GSA is the only entity other than the DoD that can buy power. So we were working a ton with utilities. Right before I left, we actually executed the largest procurement of nuclear power in the federal
Hmm.
government's history. And that was a big power agreement for 14 different agencies. So it's not just the GSA, but we're buying for others. Um, so that was part of the role. And also, it was supporting the administrator, working with the federal staff on a whole host of different initiatives. Um, and yeah, I mean, overall, I think it was an amazing role. I think it's really nice to come in and have a very clear mandate of what you're supposed to do and accomplish.
Hmm.
and then work with an entity as big as GSA, right? 20,000 employees when I was there, um, to be able to, pull the different levers, work with industry, get deals done, continue to communicate the success of what we're doing. But at the end of the day, like everything that we did made the GSA's footprint and the agencies that it supported more energy efficient. It saved money, and the things we were doing were good for the communities that these, federal buildings, courthouses, et cetera, were in. So overall, it was very rewarding work, and something that I had a lot of joy doing.
All right. So how does one become this position? Do they post on Indeed?
They don't post on Indeed.
Mm-hmm.
It's there's not like a clear path to how somebody becomes an appointee.
Mm-hmm.
Again, part of it is networking, right?
Mm-hmm.
People in the administration need to know who you are, the skill sets you have, and your interest. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Part of it is a fit. Like I, early in the administration, interviewed for a number of roles, similar type of like senior climate advisor roles. Um, for some, like I just wasn't a fit. Like I interviewed an agency, they wanted somebody that was a like emergency management expert because
Mm-hmm.
that's the side of climate they deal with. Well, great. I'm not that person. Um,
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, like these roles aren't technical in a certain way. Like I'm not there to do the day-to-day work, right? There's a whole
Mm-hmm.
federal workforce that's doing this work. To really in the role, you're also like focused on how do I collaborate with thousands, hundreds of people across the federal government to get things done. And that's what they're looking
Mm-hmm.
for is somebody that can come in and get things done. I don't necessarily need to be the expert in buying energy or, putting battery storage in buildings or whatever it might be. But like, do I have the skill sets to collaborate and move the agenda forward?
Mm-hmm.
For me, I kept, and this has been the case, across my career is like, if I want something, in this case, I really wanted to work for, the Biden administration. I kept knocking on the door, right? I kept
Mm-hmm.
following up with people. I kept finding opportunities to meet new people in the administration, learn about what they do, have them connect me to somebody else that they thought might be helpful. And, eventually, like the right opportunity, the right timing, the right fit came up. And yeah, I mean, you get a call from, the White House Office of Personnel, and they go, "Hey, would you be interested in serving in the administration? This is the role." You go through a very similar, interview process, as you would for any other job. And, there's also a good amount of vetting, that
Mm-hmm.
happens, right? They check social media, they check your background, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I always tell people, especially younger folks, like be cognizant of what you post and what you do online, because not only for the administration, but like Deloitte, any job that you need a clearance for, really any job now, like people are going to do a background check on you, and they're going to
Mm-hmm.
see, what you've posted, what you've said, et cetera. Um, so like all of those factors come into play, and then you get an opportunity to serve in an administration.
All right. Are there like pros or cons of doing this type of governmental work? Were there like certain restrictions that you had, or were you was it all was it generally pretty positive?
Super positive. And I think
All right.
the funny thing is from a consultant to in the administration, as a consultant, there's always a wall, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not the government. You're an outside entity, and you only get exposed to what's need to know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so you don't get access to everyone. You don't get into every meeting because, like, you're not part of the Navy, so you don't need to be part of every meeting in the Navy. You don't need to know everything.
Yeah.
Being in an administration, that the curtain gets lifted and you get access to everyone. So, I had a biweekly call with the chief environmental officer of the entire administration. I got
Mm.
to chat with whoever I wanted at agencies as we were collaborating with them, and they could share everything with me because now I'm on the government side. I'm not an outside entity.
Yeah.
So I really saw value in, in that because you get a completely different perspective than the perspective you have as a consultant coming into a government agency.
Hmm.
Um, so I now see the value of why people join administrations and then they leave and then they'll come and join another administration because you really understand who is who that are making these decisions and truly how the government works.
Yeah.
Coming out, yeah, there's restrictions, right? Like you can't go and directly lobby on things that you worked on before.
Hmm.
I have to be careful in what I potentially do if I were to bring on GSA as a client going forward. So there's rules. But overall, like it's the benefits outweigh any cons, like, a million to one.
All right, that's awesome. At the very beginning of our interview, you made actually I'm not sure if it was a joke, but you said as a young Armenian I had two options, being a doctor or a lawyer. I'm curious, have there been any ways that your Armenian background have affected your career, any decisions that you made or people who you met, anything like that?
I mean, the people I met, absolutely. Like I came to DC through the Army National Committee's Capital Gateway program. Um, I wouldn't have made a jump from California to having a job, et cetera, to a completely new city if I didn't know that, hey, there was this program, there was housing, there was a community of, other Armenians that I could rely on. Um, and I think community is key. I mean, you see it on Capitol Hill, you
Mm,
see it everywhere, right? There's the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, there's the Congressional Black Caucus. There's all these groups of folks that are, you know, of a similar background and they're working to help each other. They're working to become resources for each other. That's how you and I met, right? Through
yep.
this types of programming. So I think that's the benefit is like I came in with a set support system and some
Hmm.
folks that had gone through coming to DC, finding a job, navigating their career, and they're open and willing to help. And I think that's, I continue to be involved in helping other young professionals come through because of the example that was set for me when I arrived. Um, so I think that's the biggest piece, and has been the biggest benefit, I think.
All right. I want to go back earlier as well. So, if you could do it over again, would you have gotten the MBA?
No, not in the way I did.
Okay.
And there's a specific reason why. I don't think folks should not get an MBA because they want to learn about business, right? Like
Hmm.
the accounting class I took getting my MBA, like I'm not an accountant. I don't use the accounting principles anymore. The
Hmm.
entrepreneur classes, like they're great, right? You learn something different, you get exposed to something different. But I think what I've seen now being in DC and being at Deloitte, et cetera, is the MBA is really about the network you create and how you
Hmm.
learn to collaborate with others. And
Hmm.
the big piece of going to these big business schools is you get exposure to the network and then you get access to the network after you get out.
Hmm.
So if I was to do it over again, I would go get my MBA, in my late 20s versus my early 20s. And I would focus on, for me, it didn't matter where I went. I was like, hey, I need to learn more about business as I'm shifting away from science. So I'll just go to, Fresno State's program, which is a great program. Um, but like that network would have been great if I stayed in Fresno.
Hmm.
But, the Fresno
Hmm.
State MBA program doesn't have a nationwide presence as, going to Harvard or Penn or Yale or some, one of those other schools would. So I've seen the benefit of young consultants in their mid to late 20s leaving Deloitte, going in and getting an MBA for 2 years and coming back and
Hmm.
leveraging lessons learned, the network, the experience, the travel, etc. For me, I think I just did it too soon. And I mean, in my class, like I was the youngest person by several years.
Mm,
And at the time, I didn't see that as an issue, but now I see why. Like those individuals were much more mature in their career,
mm-hmm,
and they could take the lessons from the MBA and implement them in their work right away, and they could use the network right away, and they were making connections. Where I was still, 22, 23 years old when I started. Like
mm-hmm,
I didn't make the most of the experience. So nothing wrong with like I got an MBA, great, it's on my resume. I learned some things, but like to get the true value of it, I'd say wait a little bit. Um,
mm.
and again, like the point of the MBA is the network that you build and the experiences you have while you're in the program, and then when you leave, the reach back you have to the network of that whole business school. Um, and that's the only reason I'd say like I would do it a little bit differently.
All right. So if you are somebody in my position now, kind of about to enter career, or if you're somebody who's like in your position, you're kind of into career about, how would you go about, or how do you, and how would you at my age go about networking to kind of start creating these opportunities for yourself?
Yeah, I think you should look at it two ways. The first is networking should be fun.
Mm,
So look at people that are in positions that you want to be in eventually, and reach out to those folks and show genuine curiosity in how they got there, what they do, and meet these people. Let them be inspirations. Let them give you advice on, hey, these are the steps I took. This is what you should consider. Um,
hmm
and I think maybe even when we met in DC, we talked about this. Like you have your core network, which are the people that you interact with, work with, go to school with every day. You have your
hmm
support network, which is mentors, individuals that can give you advice, look at your resume, help you prep for an interview, et cetera. And then you have your broader expanded network, and that's where opportunities come from.
mm,
And in that expanded network, like you should really reach out far and wide and talk to anyone and everyone because even if they're tangentially related to what you want to do, that is experience and insight that you can use.
mm,
At a more tactical level, um, I always tell people write down the 10 to 20 companies that you would want to work for if you got the opportunity and start with three connections at each company. Start in LinkedIn, adding people, start reaching out, start having coffees, but eventually build it up so that you have a couple of different connections at each of these companies. They don't all have
mm,
to specifically be in, like, say, I'm interested in energy. They don't all have to be energy people, right?
hmm
Let's say 75% are energy people, and the other 25% are in different parts of the organization. But
hmm
really, the idea is one, great, you learn from them, you understand what they do, you understand the culture. But networking isn't always about like I'm gonna go talk to this person because I want a job now, right? In my
mm,
stories, like the people that helped me in my network helped me a year to 2 years after I met them.
mm,
But right now, say you want to go work at Meta and you start to build these connections, and your first job out of college isn't at Meta, it's somewhere else. And
hmm
9 months later, the perfect entry level opportunity at Meta opens up. If you're starting to network at that point, you're already behind the game. But
mm,
if starting now, you had started to cultivate relationships and connect with people at Meta, well, 9 months, a year, 9 months, whatever. From now, when that
hmm
opportunity opens up, like they already know you. They know that network with them out of genuine curiosity. They have followed your career. They've seen your LinkedIn posts, things like that. So when you come back and you say, hey, you know, I know we connected 6 months ago when I started this new job, this new opportunity opened up at Meta. Would you be willing to refer me, tell me more about the role? Like you're going to have so much more success in having others help you if you've done the
mm.
groundwork way before that opportunity ever came up.
All right. Well, Ty, this has been an incredible conversation. Is there any advice that you'd like to, any final words of wisdom you'd like to impart?
Sure. And this has been wonderful, and I appreciate you doing this. I'm really excited to
Appreciate
see
having you.
this continue to go forward.
Thank you.
People always ask, hey, what's the one piece of advice, etc. I always say fail fast and fail forward.
Mm,
Um, People always, I think often wait until whatever they want to do is perfect, and then they
mm,
go do it. And
mm,
even if you wait until you think it's perfect, it's not going to be perfect, and you're going to have to rework it. So my philosophy has always been like, if I have an idea, just jump into it quicker, fail
mm,
quicker, get the feedback I need to fix it, and continue to iterate going forward versus let me sit on it for 2 months, fail the same way I'm going to fail anyway,
mm,
and then start fixing it. But now I'm 2 months behind. Um,
mm,
and like some of those examples with the Navy, like when we built them a procurement tool, look, I didn't know how to build a procurement tool, but I knew
mm,
that, hey, the client needs this. Like they just got, you know, their boss, really laid into them for not having a plan for why they buy things the way they buy things.
mm,
Now, I could have spent 2 months, meeting with different people and getting this perfect plan together. But instead, I was like, it's never going to be right. Like, we're going to have to work and iterate and build this anyway. So I put together
mm,
a pitch in 2 days, went to the client and said, hey, we can do this. It
mm,
won't come out the same way, but like this is the general idea. And we jumped in, we did it, we built the tool. There was a lot of pushback. There's a lot of things that we made assumptions on that weren't true that we had to fix eventually. But like if I had waited 2 months to go present that, the
mm,
urgency that the client had felt coming out of that meeting where they couldn't answer the questions they needed to would have been gone.
yeah.
Or somebody else could have brought them an idea, or they could have figured something else out on their own.
Mm,
So move quickly. Like failing at something is not a bad thing. It gets you on the right path quicker.
mm.
So fail quick, fail forward. Um, that's like, what I live by. That's my closing advice, I guess.
All right. Well, thank you again. It's been a lot of fun talking with you today. I really appreciate all your time.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you have any thoughts or feedback, shoot me an email at nick@reroutedpod.com. If you like the show, leave a review. You can find links to our website and socials in the description below. I'm looking forward to seeing you next week.